Welcome back to Brokers of Secrets. In this episode, we have my dear friend Jonathan. Now, I'll let him decide if he wants to share his last name. I will say this, he's one of the most special people that I know, who I also would call not just a best friend, but pretty much family. There are times in our lives where we meet someone and we're like, wow, it's kindred spirit, yes. But there's also such alignment that you're like, man, I just want to see this person win. And Jonathan has been, we've known each other for what, 2.5, 3 years now? Yeah. He's been with Upgrade for a good 2.5 years. And frankly, we just love talking about whatever we talk about. So today's episode isn't so much the let me push his boundary, is I want to share with you what happens when your boundary is pushed in a way that's strategic, that's according to his design for over 2 years. If that's okay with you, I'd love for us to first hear an introduction from yourself. Don't be humble, right? Brag about yourself in any shape, way, or form that you like. And you don't have to disclose anything that you don't want to. But I'd love for our audience to really get to know you, at least to a certain degree.
Okay. I think it's really interesting that Will talks about family. And I think what's been so incredibly interesting and important in this journey is Will has the most intense desire to watch everyone around him succeed. When you deal or work with a lot of people, there's a self-interest, there's a degree of self-serving. And the number of times I've watched Will sublimate his own ego, his own needs, his own desires, his own wants for the success of his clients is remarkable. I mean, it's a true gift. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing that he does. So I think that's one of the first things I would say is a lot of times you'll be going through these different organizations and you feel or know that they're just making money off you. It's a process of churn. And what's so different is Will invests himself in you. He invests his time, his energy, his belief. And I think that shows in the programming because every single time I've been coming for 2.5, 3 years, every time what you see in the higher levels is brought down to the lower sort of price points, so that the standard that's being delivered is perpetually upgrading. He gives away exponentially more than you pay, so you always have this significant ROI. Any time that's spent, any money that's spent, any energy that's exchanged, always has exponential returns. And so we met, funnily enough, I was talking at a conference. It was an AI conference in Tallinn. And I kind of found out I was diabetic at the time because I think the worst thing that can ever happen as a speaker generally is considered passing out. I mean, that has to be everyone's worst nightmare. And I literally stood up to go talk and I was like, okay, I'm about to pass out. So I passed out through a the TV screen mess, but it was so interesting that the humility and the humbling that can occur from your body as your body says to you, no, I'm not willing to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. No, you've pushed me too hard. No, you've driven too hard. Is one of those catalysts in life that can drive you to very interesting change points. I spoke to Will at that event. He was also talking, and I decided to sign up for one of his courses. I, started like most people do with something that was very low cost, affordable. If it didn't work, no win, no foul. And what was fascinating was Will was like, let's go for lunch. We live 600 yards from each other. Let's go out for lunch. And we
found out we were practically neighbors.
Practically neighbors. And we went for lunch, and I was talking to him about my life. And I think the most pivotal or important part of my journey at that point was everything I had achieved had been without feeling, without emotion, without sensation. As I've gone through his program, I later found out that I numbed out when I was 2 years old. My brother and sister both died. And when my brother died, I was coming downstairs as my parents were being interviewed in separate rooms by the police. And the pain and the exquisite agony that they were in was so overwhelming for me that I actually took their pain and I took my pain and I kind of just numbed it all out, crushed it up inside, and didn't feel after that again. So it was interesting. I mean, my mum always described my childhood. I was always the kid that was smiling. I was always the kid that was happy, but I never experienced actual joy. I had this outward perception of it, but there was no physical feeling of it that transcribed through. So I was blessed with a fairly reasonable aesthetic form, which is, a great gift. And so people would look at me and think that I had everything, think how happy I was or how smiley I was or whatever, but I felt nothing. And that kind of progressed through my childhood, through my adult life. It was always goals, goals, goals. Let's knock down a goal. Let's knock down a goal. Let's knock down a goal. But there was no joy or satisfaction in the goal because I didn't feel. As we come back to this lunch, I sat down with Will and we discussed, he's like, would you be willing to feel? Would you like to feel? Would that be something interesting to you? Would that be something acceptable to you? And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm willing to try. And so we did a quick little table exercise, which is the kind of things he does. He'll do these little, here, just try this for size. How does it feel? How does it work? Something comfortable, something manageable, something safe. And you try it and then you're like, okay, that worked. And it led into an interesting journey of like somatic work, of body work, of really learning self-exploration and healing. And it was this beautiful journey of learning to understand who I was and coming to be in touch with myself, to be able to feel and experience the full joy of life, which is this unbelievable, incredible gift that we so often take for granted. We're rushing from goal to goal, achievement to achievement, missing out on the actual pleasure of the journey. And everyone always says, enjoy the journey, not the goal. And it wasn't until I did Will's work that I truly was able to understand in a format what it was or what it means to feel, what it means to experience life, live life, feel fulfilled, feel value, feel joy, feel pleasure, feel happiness. And I think, many people take those sensations and feelings for granted. And then also many people actually flood themselves with those feelings. And because they have so much of those feelings, they actually are also missing out on life. So what I've learned is that everything takes place at one of the two extremes. And where real life happens, where real happiness happens, is towards the center when you find a place of calm, a place of belonging, a place of understanding, a place of knowing. And that is the greatest gift that Will has given me, is this place of knowing, this place of peace that I can always return to, that no matter what's going on in the world around me, no matter how busy it is, how hectic it is, or what's happening, or flying from this city to that city, or meetings, or things that everyone normally would find stressful, I have this place of calm, this place of total relaxation that I can go to that's always perpetually safe. And it's interesting because it impacts the other people in the room. And so it gives you a lot of control and power, because whoever has the calmest state in the room and the strongest state in the room can generally lead, control, and manage the people around them. And so that's been a phenomenally powerful tool in business.
I love that the self-intro became a compliment to me. Thank you. That was very kind. I was hoping that you'd tell the audience a little bit more about your impressive background. Now, of course, you don't have to share anything that you don't want to share. I will say this. This is probably going to be one of the most powerful episodes, because it's not just about watching what happens when the boundary is pushed, when the human psyche is being pushed and pushed. to optimize, but it's also what happens when you push it towards the right direction? What happens when you allow your environment to pull you towards the right direction, a direction that brings you joy and peace and happiness? So, Jonathan, would you tell us a little bit about like how it was like before? I mean, I know that you said it was very much calculated, strategic, no feelings, basically. But what else could you tell us more? Because I want to show them the A and B.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of high achievers out there. There's a lot of people that would describe themselves as type A or whatever. I always said I was like a type Zeta because I wasn't really chasing competition to beat someone else. All of my competition was internal with myself. I had incredibly high goals, incredibly high expectations. I always believed that if you aim for the stars and fell short, you would go further than everybody else. And I was in a perpetual cycle of self-flagellation or self-immolation, of being incredibly cruel to myself, incredibly critical, incredibly demanding, demeaning of myself, because I was never living up to the expectations and standards that I was trying to meet. I had this relentless pursuit of perfection and excellence that drove me just to extreme lengths to absolutely excel in everything that I did, to never fall short. And no matter what I did, I always found something to critique. Nothing was ever good enough. I was never good enough. I didn't love myself. I wasn't worthy of love. I put myself through inordinate amounts of pain. And I think we live in a society that has this cultural mythology of, Will often talks about the hero's journey, where it's about overcoming adversity. It's about taking on challenges. It's about succeeding against all the odds. And I think that mythology is so toxic to the actual purpose of life and the journey and what we're doing. The religious concepts of heaven and hell are really, really interesting. And I suppose this is the first time I'm phrasing this or expressing this. My life prior to going through Will's programming, getting a new format and a new understanding of myself, was a living hell. I created my own personal hell on earth. And when you think of when I think of my definition of hell, I've always described it. You when you die, you get to go, and for a year, you get to watch all the videos of what your life was, all of the forks in the road, because life is just a series of forks. It's a series of choices. And every time you made a bad choice, that video would be played to you, what the outcome would have been of the right choice, of taking the right path. And I think my definition of hell is when you only perceive the wrong paths you took and you beat yourself and flagellate yourself over those wrong paths, those bad choices, the negativity of the journey. And so I had created for myself a living hell where my body was getting torn apart. I would ski to the limit and end up in surgeries. I would do martial arts to the limit and end up in surgeries. Everything I did, I pushed to the absolute nth degree, the nth limit. I remember when my daughter was born, she had central apnea and laryngomalacia, which are a brainstem disorder and a soft palate. And I think that's largely one of the major causes of SIDS. And I was literally giving a CPR 3 times a week, maybe more, for 3-4 months on end. And I took such a toll on my body. It was, I ended up having strokes and things. And it was like, I made everything so intensely hard for myself. Because of that childhood programming, because of those childhood beliefs, because of where I had come from. And then to flip to the contrast, once you've pushed through, you find this beautiful place. I always give the analogy of you walk into a room full of bubbles. And as you walk into a room full of bubbles, if you push the bubble moves further and further away from you, faster and faster. what you have to do is enter this place of stillness. And in that stillness and that calm, the bubble comes in and it surrounds you and it envelops you, and it gives you all of the sensations and beauty that come from the bubble. There's the colors that you see, there's the smells, the soft sensitivity, there's all these things. And so when you can reach a place where you realize that this earth, this planet, this life was literally created as heaven, as a gift, to yourself, from yourself, which I can explain more later, but then you reach this place of calm and stillness, of belonging, of knowing, of trusting, where you recognize that life is just pleasure and happiness and joy. This was heaven that we gave ourselves to experience, and everything is really, really easy. I mean, the only time it's hard is when we choose to make it hard. And I think that is probably the biggest concept that I learned to understand and know from Will. I always said, the only thing in life we control is our perspective and the actions we take as a result. But what I didn't really realize and understand was the knowing and the meaning that sits behind that, of when you realize who you are, that you're an energy form, that you're an energy being, that has always existed since the beginning of time and will always exist till the end of time, because there is no time. And once you start to understand that kind of concept, which is incredibly, incredibly hard to understand and grasp, you suddenly realize that time was created to allow things to unfold for you. And it unfolds in thousands and thousands of different ways and iterations, with all these forks and choices in the road. And with a place of just calm and being, you can choose which of those paths you take. You choose which journey you take. You choose which story you want to tell, who you want to tell it with, how it goes. And that is so powerful, because it's such a joyful, happy, incredible place full of pleasure. And it's so easy because we designed it that way. We designed it that we would go through hardship and fight through hardship so that we could appreciate the ease and the joy and the pleasure. So I think that concept of heaven and hell is misdescribed, because there's a connotation that heaven and hell is after you die, but you never really die anyway. And so what it really is we've created heaven and hell for ourselves through our own thoughts, choices, perception, perspectives, and what we choose to do and how we choose to do it and how we choose to make it for ourselves. So everything truly is a choice.
Would you say that you were experiencing this transition from that, what you call living hell, to this heavenly state? Is that more, or is it something else? What's point A, point B in terms of contrast?
Yeah, I mean, so point A was prior to understanding, prior to knowing. It was drive, ambition, goals, competition, rat race, chasing. It was all the hero's journey. It was really, really tough. It was really hard. It was really brutal. And I watched other people, and I could see that people were living these incredible lives that had this incredible joy, that had this incredible pleasure. But that wasn't available to me. I didn't choose that. I wasn't able to choose that. I wasn't able to perceive that. And I think that's where it gets really interesting, is by Upgrade providing a mental structure and construct that allows you to manage, choose, and control and make it manageable, while it teaches you the much higher theories and principles of what it's really about. Because we need to know that programming stuff, because that type A personality, or that Zeta personality, whatever you choose to call it, that striving personality. And then once you go through that structure, you realize that you can actually you let go of the beliefs that are holding you back. You let go of the beliefs that are limiting you. You start to understand the purpose of life. And there's a lot of work in it. There's a lot of somatic work. There's a lot of working with the coaches, asking the questions, driving through the timelines, taking away the somatic historical pain of the body of the prior generations. I mean, there's so much work in it. But the moments when you come through, when things crystallize and become clear, are so beautiful because they're just the embodiment of love, self-love, loving yourself, believing in yourself, knowing yourself, and most importantly, seeing yourself as other people see you. And that, I think, is the hardest place. And I say this so often to people. You live in a world where you create stories about how other people perceive you. And you create these incredibly complex stories that don't necessarily serve you in any way. And I always say to people, like, as one takeaway, go ask people how you make them feel. Go ask people how they experience you. Go ask people. And it requires intense vulnerability, because obviously you're worried of rejection. You're worried of negative responses. You're worried they're going to say something bad. But that allows you to actually see how the world sees you. And I think that's one of the things that Will's work has really helped me do, is see the world through a different lens, to see myself in the world through a different lens. And once I changed the lens with which I view myself in the world around me immediately changed to fit that worldview, because everything really is just our perception of reality. And it's funny, I come back to the analogy, if a tree falls over in a forest and no one's there to observe it, did it make any noise? And the answer is the tree didn't fall over, the forest wasn't there, there was no noise because none of it existed. If you look at the two-slit experiment in quantum physics, you'll see that observation is the catalyst. Observation is what makes it happen. And I think that's, it's one of the people I met this week is a quantum computer physicist who does error correction in quantum computing. And it was like, it's so interesting. You can only error correct on a very small percentage, because whatever you're error correcting on, no longer it falls out of the quantum field. And it was just kind of fascinating to see that process of when we observe, when we see, we create. And what we see, we create. And so it gets very interesting to see and understand that your thoughts, your perceptions, your concept, your psychological makeup of the structure of the world around you creates and manages the world's responses. And so Will and I will often be, on phone calls, we'll talk, we'll chat, and we'll be looking at how the world is mirroring our inner beliefs, our inner thought process. And I think that's been a massive part of the second phase is that understanding that everything is just a reflection of how internally we see ourselves. So yeah.
I had the pleasure of speaking with that same gentleman, and I brought up something interesting to him. I said, I once met with some people, and I said, wouldn't it be great if the world has no conflicts? And his response, this in the past, this one gentleman, not the same one we're talking about, said, well, if there are no conflicts, there would be no innovation. And that would affect the economy. Now, I brought it up with this quantum computing expert. I was like, this is what someone told me. He said, who says innovation is important?
It's a different angle.
Yeah, I was like, wow, interesting. He's like, what is it that we're after here, right? Is it more money, more? Is it peace? Is it happiness? Is it harmony? Clearly he's thinking in a different valley level, right? And I just looked at him and I'm like, there's a whole bunch of people out there that are thinking it requires something negative to happen for something good to happen. And then I looked at myself, per your statement earlier. I'm like, how often do I feel Because if someone's telling me in my reality, right, because we're going deep here, so may as well, right? If someone's telling me that concept, I'm not just going to perceive that as someone outside. There's something inside of me that is projecting that outward. So not only do I need to examine my own belief system, instead of judging the person, I need to examine what is it inside that I'm so ignorant of that requires someone outside to voice it out loud for me to see it, for me to hear my own voice, for me to see the discrepancy or the error correction that I needed, right? And then when someone like that quantum computing expert shows up in our lives and he brings that up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so focused on innovation. I created conflicts in my own life to understand innovation. How could I blame the global, the collective human race in doing the same? So I thought that was interesting that you brought up this person, because that conversation was pretty cool. I mean, I had a separate conversation with him.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as you look at reality as we live in it. If you look at the place that we exist and how we exist, most of the religions, most of the stories, most of the mythologies come from the same place. They all date back to the same original text. And I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that. But what's interesting as you run through all of the stories, all of the creation, what they give us is a journey and a pathway and a guidebook to ascend. And I think the deeper you dig into all of the religions, the ascendance and the guidebook is all leading to the same place, which is we are all one. Everything is one. Everything is this whole single energy point source. And all we're trying to do in our journey is return back to that point. And I think it's just interesting as you look at other people's experience of that journey back to oneness. Conflict is a natural, inherent response of breaking apart from oneness. So the conflict that exists is the two sides of the same coin. The opposite of a return to oneness is a breaking apart. And so I've always looked at the Kabbalistic Jewish mysticism piece. I always used to observe with the Kabbalists that I met, there was two schools. There were those that had these very, very cloudy eyes, very cloudy pupils, and they believed everything was in this confusion, this conflict, and had one school of thought. And then on the other side, there was this group that had this incredible clarity in their eyes, this just bright, glowing knowing where everything was about this return to oneness. And I think we live in a world where you can't appreciate or enjoy light without dark. You can't appreciate dark and the quiet without light. You can't appreciate quiet without noise and noise without quiet. And so we're in this unique place of trying to find balance, trying to find a middle ground, trying to find understanding within a very complex structure that we've created in our own minds to allow us this journey to find balance, to find moderation, to find that oneness. And it's interesting. I think one of the things that Will really teaches around is the value levels of different people and understanding where your main drivers, your main personal characteristics, qualities, and basis sit on those value levels really defines where you choose conflict, where you choose oneness, where you choose all these different things, and how you perceive them and how you respond to them, how you react to them, and who it ultimately leads you to become. So it's just this very, very interesting journey about balance for me. And that's where we've really focused from a business perspective, is trying to create and understand balance and harmony in the world. And so it's interesting watching a lot of the social media with confirmation bias trying to drive people out to the extremes, because the more you drive people to the extremes, the more energy you capture, the more attention you capture, the more powerful you become. But when you look at the people, you Buddhist monks or the Dalai Lama or any of you great religious leaders, they're all trying to draw things back to the middle, back to this central, safe, peaceful place, this calm and harmony where we can all live together in balance. So it's interesting as you bring up that sort of conflict.
Yeah, there is a lot of driving to the extreme, because when one goes to the extreme, I think the boundary, right? It's the extreme corners of the limitations. And so I think if we were to reflect back on self, in a sense, in terms of how, if we're all one, what is the self doing, right? If we were to classify the entire human race as one self, what I'm noticing is we're pushing ourselves to the extremes to find the boundaries. But at the same time, we're not at peace inside as the collective. And as you said, these leaders of the past that have wanted to bring people to the center, people tend to find peace inside. But it's the dichotomy of peace versus innovation. I think the next wave, the next evolution of humanity is how to have both peace and innovation.
I mean, I wonder with innovation as a concept, if innovation is in any way in conflict with peace or centeredness or harmony. I think when you look at boundary pushing and trying to push boundaries and push extremes, very often that's not innovation. Very often that's fear-driven and that's fear-based. So I think a lot of the boundary pushing is we're afraid of something. And I think that innovation in it as of itself, I mean, when you start looking at artificial intelligence, it's this fascinating concept and paradigm, because we're creating something smarter than us. We're creating something more intelligent than us. We're actually creating something that ultimately will make us subservient, because we live in currently an intellect economy that prizes intellect, which pays for intellect, where the more intellect you have, the more money you make, the more you do, the more you achieve, the stronger and better you are. And yet we've created something that has so much intellectual capability and power. And as we move into AGI and then superintelligence, it will totally subsume us, because it's created a new world, a new paradigm, a new environment. And so, I mean, we have these conversations of universal basic instincts as income, as jobs go away, as we call it resource reallocation, as jobs change and shift to different things. We move into this very, very interesting economy and place where peace and harmony is the great potential outcome of innovation, but heightened conflict is the opposite side of the same coin. So as we move more to peace and harmony, we also move more to the other extreme or the other pole of self-destruction. When a artificial intelligence system looks at us, when a super AGI looks at us, I mean, the only logical conclusion, in my opinion, it can reach is that we're a parasite, that we're a cancer, because we grow, we take over the earth, we destroy everything, we kill everything, we cut down the trees, which are the lungs of the planet, we kill the animals, we drive the lions out of the plains, we take all the animals out of the forest and destroy the forest. I mean, so how do we create an AI, a superintelligence, who is benevolent, who is loving, who is kind, who cares about us? And I think who the creators of that intelligence are, the creators of those boundaries, is now really, really critical, because you find yourself with these organizations that are trying to win at any cost versus organizations that understand the great responsibility that we hold in developing these artificial intelligence systems to protect humanity and keep ourselves safe.
You know, that whole concept about peace if we develop this in a state of peace, I think we're going to have a different outcome. Because as you brought up the Kabbalah, inside of it, it talks about how when we as humans are the closest to the light, when we are the closest to the light, we'll feel the peace. But it's a journey to God, right? That's a guidebook, literally. But along with that comes inspiration and knowing. And I think innovation currently is drawing inspiration and recipes from the dark side of that, from conflict, from needing to destroy or needing to win a battle where there's a loser. Whereas innovation that comes from the pure light, the source, the oneness, I think it's going to have a very different, not only different ring to it, but one's going to notice the effects on our human society it's going to be magnificent. So I suspect that innovation is nothing but a download of something that improves our lives towards a certain direction. But some of the innovations, if the source is coming from something darker, not so wonderful, not benevolent, I suspect the consequences can still be corrected, but it's leaning towards something self-destructive.
I always remember Mila Jovovich in Fifth Element. And as she came down and she watches the videos of human history, and she's just crying and can't believe the war, the suffering, the pain, and the trauma and everything. And it's so interesting. I mean, I always look at the two sort of major killers when you go back to the Crusades and you look at all of the people killed in the name of Jesus. And then the flip side of that coin is communism came in and all the people killed in the name of communism. So you see that there's a bastardization, there's an assumption of something which is a good principle that is then mutated into something toxic or malevolent, as you're sort of describing. And I think that AI has very much that potential, because there are people that are going to build things that are harmonistic, that are positive, that are good. And there are people that are going to try and hijack that for their own personal gain, for weird psychological trauma they had as a child that they're expressing, who will be able to take those tools and use them for incredible evil. And it's how we build the rules and regulations, the guiding principles that are going to be really important. And I suppose I'm realizing for the first time that we need to create the Bible or the rule book, the guidebook for the AI, which is something we've been very passionate about and kind of trying to understand and pursue. But there's a very unique opportunity to create the set of rules and guidelines that the AGI lives by. And so, there's been a lot of movies about it. I remember, I think it was iRobot with Will Smith, where, you create this mother brain that just is hell-bent on killing humanity, or Terminator and whatever. So we have programmed into our psyche the downsides, the negatives, the bad outcomes that are potential. And I think it really becomes interesting as to how we create positive outcomes. And I think that Upgrade plays a very large place in that, because by creating more conscious leaders, by creating more people that think about these things in a positive light and are looking at and exploring them from a constructive light of growing humanity in a healthy and constructive way, I think that creates more opportunity for future leaders of the world to really drive a different agenda.
Yeah, you brought up a point where childhood trauma can cause someone to act in a way that is not in alignment with even their own benefits, not to mention the benefits of other people in society. Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, I mean, my childhood was one of death. It was one of pain. It was my brother and sister died My great aunts raised me, you know, a lot of the time because my parents were busy working, building a business, grieving, weren't as emotionally available maybe as I needed. And also I stopped them from being as emotionally available to reduce their pain and my pain and stuff. And so it's interesting when you look at these events. I remember there was a really profound childhood event. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old must have been. And I was at a school play and I was standing there and the headmaster came up and he grabbed me and he dragged me out and made me sit by him in the audience. And I never knew what I did. And I told myself all of these stories for all of these years about I was always trying to understand what I did wrong. And it wasn't until I did some hypnotherapy and kind of went back and reopened this event. And then I went and talked to my parents that they were like, oh, yeah, there was a complaint by all of the parents at the school, everyone who attended. He refused to meet with us without a lawyer. Like, you know, it was obviously something he'd done that was completely wrong that everyone else found offensive. But that was like this major event that drove a lot of my decision making in my life. I think watching my siblings die and my family, the people who loved me, it created this incredible construct in my mind where life and death were fairly merged. So I spent many, many years living more in a state of death than life, where I was more not alive than alive. And so that's that process of how do we enter into this information? How do we understand it? How do we break it down? How do we remove it? And so much of this information, so much of these belief systems and patterns and characteristics of our character and our moral code and compass cannot be helped by therapy. I mean, you can sit in therapy for 10, 20, 30 years and not get deep enough to actually the source and to be able to have tools to change, eliminate, or modulate those belief systems. And that's something that Upgrade gives you, is the ability to go in and reframe and rephrase who you are at your sub-programming level, at your deepest programming levels, because you have your subconscious and you have like this croc brain that functions. And it's like, how do we reprogram those most basic sympathetic nervous system responses to create for healthy and positive outcomes? And that's really, I think, where my growth has come, is the opportunity to explore the decision-making protocols, the sub-programming that defines how I make decisions and why I make decisions. And that, I think, is the area of the greatest gratitude that I have to Will, was that he created a simplification of a very complex process that allows you to understand and rewrite that code very, very quickly, very simplistically, to allow you to become a completely different person to who you are when you enter the program.
Thank you for sharing that. I sense that a lot of people, when they're hearing this and understanding that this construct inside of our minds literally will prevent us from seeing life in a way that may benefit us, right? And this construct that oftentimes constructed itself because of whether it's trauma or whatever, sometimes it's buried so deep in the human psyche. And sometimes it's not even just the trauma, it's a program that seems to have nothing wrong with it, but it's buried deep in the unconscious because it was learned at such a young age. The challenge that I have with people who are like, oh, I'm just not even gonna see a therapist. They're just gonna talk to their friends. They watch a couple of YouTube videos, right? I mean, I would say at least go see a therapist for these people. But the problem is, to me, we're not doing any therapy. We're building a rocket. We're building a world. We're building a universe, or optimizing a universe inside of someone's mind. It requires mathematics. It requires structure that's very clear, not let's navigate by intuition into outer space. maybe we should put the screws here to build this rocket because hopefully it works. No, it needs to be calculated. So the difference is drastic. Could you share a little bit about, I mean, only if you're comfortable, where you're heading and where things are going for you since those, prior moments that you've talked about?
I'll give you one story from the past, which will help make the present and the future make more sense.
Please.
My son was born with special needs. He had gross developmental delay. He couldn't learn how to do things by himself. He had to be taught everything in a process and a process flow and one step at a time. One of the things that was really fascinating is when a child utilizes utensils and brings food to their mouth or whatever using the utensil, they learn to articulate their wrist, they learn to do things, they learn processes and steps. The same with brushing your teeth or something. It's a fine motor versus gross motor skill. What that taught me was when we left out a single stage of the process of teaching him how to do things, that skill actually created in me the ability to design and build businesses better, because the same is true of a business. If there's a single step missing, if there's one little piece that you forgot, everything falls down. And I think most people, when they're building and growing their businesses, are focused on the macro positions, the macro goals, the macro pieces of the puzzle, and they miss the nuance of the individual detail within the business, the individual stepping stones. So when I was designing and building my current business, I sat down and I drew up a roadmap of every single component part, every twist, every turn. I designed everything. I planned everything. I built this systematic approach that when you think like that, it's almost impossible for it to fail. And I think that was something really fabulous with Upgrade, is you do it in your business and it's almost instinctive in your business. You look at Lean Sigma 6 or you look at process flows or manufacturing plants or whatever, but we neglect that within ourselves. We don't do that for ourselves. And I think, one of the reasons Elon Musk is so successful and has done so well in society and the world and business and is so misunderstood is he sat down and he came up with a plan. I want to get to Mars so that if there is a catastrophic event on Earth, humanity survives. So it's at the raw base of it, it's a survival instinct. But what he did was different is he then worked back every single step, every single stage. Okay, if I'm on Mars, I have no oxygen. I can't have a combustion engine to get around. I therefore need batteries. I need electric motors. I need Tesla. I need to get into space. How do I get into space? I need to build rockets. I can't buy a rocket. Okay, I'm going to build a rocket. There's SpaceX. Okay, now I've built this. Wait a sec, I need people to do all the work there, but I can't get people there. People take up a lot of resources. It's hard to get people there, so let's build it all with robots. Here's Optimus. Oh, I need to understand and manage the systems, and make everything work and make it all manageable in a complex fashion. Oh, here's XAI. What was interesting was I believe it was Peter Thiel that had a conversation with him and said, hey, the problem you have with your dream right now is when you get to Mars, Earth can still come get you. So you have to resolve and heal some of the problems on Earth. And he bought Twitter, which was very, very controversial. But what was interesting about the controversion of that was what he did was just wanted to give a voice or space to speak for everybody. So everyone has a space, and it was interesting that it's now perceived as this incredibly toxic right-wing kind of thing. But when you look at the comments on it, there's just as many people on the far left. So you see this interesting construct that he created. And then you look at Neuralink, which is actually his most valuable company and the most underrated, which is, okay, how do I connect humans to the robots? How do I connect humans to the system? How do I download human memories to make us immortal, everything else? And Neuralink really is this beautiful part of that. And so what was interesting was when I was building and designing my business, I had this end goal, this end outcome that I was looking to achieve. And I worked backwards with every single step that got me to the beginning place. And I was able to then design out exactly what I needed to. And so what's interesting is as you go through Upgrade, there's a variety of designing tools that you will use to design your life. I always advise people to start at the very far extreme, the farthest date out, and work backwards, because I think you have exponentially better results. I mean, a lot of people build up with what's close because they can see what's close. It's tangible. It's something they can understand. But if you start with a massive end goal in mind in life and work backwards, it becomes very easy to achieve this colossal goal. And I think that's the difference with certain people in the world and certain thinkers and certain types of brains, is they can start at the end point and work backwards, which is far, far more powerful than working from, this is where I am right now. What's my next step? Because the next step is always the hardest to see. The end point is actually the easiest.
I'm glad you said that, because most of the time when we do these episodes, when it's not the after, it's the during or before, or like someone just met me type thing. And I don't know much about them. I'm here to help them push their boundaries in one episode. What I've noticed is that most of the time people are thinking, I'm going to go from here to here to here to here to here to here, so that they can start in a position of, this is what's realistic, right? But they lack pixel if we have them say, hey, why don't you go 100 year out? But what they don't understand is that's one of the greatest cheat codes, greatest strategies to be able to look backward, right? Because most people are thinking, if I just get from point A to point A.1, like 8.1, then I can look at 8.2, 8.3, many steps later, point B. But instead, I always ask our guests, what's point B, what's point C, what's point D, what's point Y, all the way. But they're like, no, we got to stay here because you got to earn it. You got to do this. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think that to each their own. But the boundary of humanity is being pushed because of AI and quantum computing. And it's not just because of that. It's humans are pushing that boundary. So I'm curious. I know that some people who know you or may have heard you speak or gotten to know you in trainings, they know that you're involved in AI, heavily involved, and you're doing some really big projects. Share only what you feel is appropriate, how you went from point A to like exponentially, whatever the letter is, right? Could you tell us more?
I started with an endpoint in mind, and I knew what it looked like, and then was able to have that vision take form and create more granularity, more detail, more pixels. When you look at building artificial intelligence systems, the training data is kind of the pivotal area, because you have to create boundings on the training data, because the end outcome is basically a construct of the quality of the inputs. And the higher the quality of the inputs, the higher the quality of the outputs. As you start to deal with governments and global governments and the systems that rule and govern humanity, the construct of training AI just from general training data, from swallowing all of the internet, versus taking specific segments of very tightly controlled, tightly managed data, and training the AI on that creates a completely different type of outcome. And it's interesting when you look at life, the quality of the 5 people who surround you and the quality of the conversations you have every day is what defines who you become and how you become that person. And so there's a very interesting construct as you go through your personal growth and evolution is upskilling the people around you learning to trust in them and believe in them more and more and more. And that's been one of the sort of crossover constructs here with AI, is the quality of that data that's going in and the quality of the person vetting that data and understanding that data, the human in the loop that's managing it and making sure it learns really, really well, is very, very powerful. And it changes everything dramatically.
So where do you think the world's heading?
I think it depends who wins. I think civilization has a series of winner-take-all games. I think Ray Dalio is looking very deeply into the change of the next order, the change of the next magnitude, the change of the next world order. Because you've moved from kind of agrarian society, well, you moved from hunter-gatherers to agrarian societies to kind of rule of law to conquesting societies. And then you've moved further into sort of these arable communities and then into monarchistic societies and those kind of rules. And then you've moved more recently into this industrial society, this industrial revolution. I always laugh at this. I mean, my favorite construct of the industrial revolution was 3 meals a day. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, no one ever ate 3 meals a day, ever. It just didn't exist. It was a nonsensical thought. But they needed to shut down the machinery and service the machinery. And so they created this food construct that people were eating food while that time was happening. And it's just interesting watching how humanity changes and evolves as a result of the technology. So, I mean, as you start to look at, as we talked about Neuralink, basically the brain is a biological quantum computer. In my opinion, it was clearly designed by someone or something. And what's interesting as we watch this Neuralink process, we're moving into an evolution of creating that product which we already have. So we are already the product and we're learning how to create ourselves. So it's kind of a very interesting journey of watching us return to that. But what's been very interesting to me is watching the growth and collapse of all the civilizations that have gone on over time, over societies, over all of these norms. You watch the fall of Greece, fall of Rome, fall of Babylon, the Roman sort of empire converted itself and changed into the Catholic Empire. You see the continued evolution and process of this. You've seen, the rise and fall of French Revolution, the Spanish, Indian society, Chinese society, Japanese society. These societies grow up, they evolve, they become really powerful, and then they collapse. And I think a lot of what everyone is looking at the moment is this American society that rose and is kind of in a process of collapse. And then there's a rise of the Chinese community at the moment that's happening, the Indian community. So it's just interesting to watch these power shifts change and trend. I mean, you look at the collapse that's really taken place in Europe. They've destroyed themselves. They've imploded in quite a horrendous fashion. But I think that as you look at AI, as you look at technology, as you look at the evolution of what we're building, it's really going to come down to who the builder is, which system it is, and who wins, and how they win. I think that there are groups where the founding principle of the business of the group was came from a negative place. And I think there are groups that the founding principle came from a positive place. And, you look at companies where they're founded by people who stole things from other people. And obviously they're never necessarily going to reach a healthy evolution just on the basis of where they came from, without a lot of work, because everyone can change. But, and then you look at the companies that came out that they are the evolution of watching something that was meant to be good turn toxic, and they're like, we want to create the good version. So I think there's a lot of forces for good out there at the moment, and it really is going to be about staying with seeing who wins. It's going to be a really interesting time.
I sense that this good group winning is something that is becoming more and more likely. And this is just a gut feeling. Previously, you said it was hell on earth. What about now? Where are you at now?
I couldn't be happier. It's amazing watching things happen as you plan them to happen, that it's easy, it's effortless, it just comes in and flows in. And I know for people on the outside watching, they are watching through a lens of trial and tribulation, and feast and famine and all these things. So from the outside, some people are still seeing that and perceiving that. But from the inside, having moved into this mindset of abundance, this place of joy and glory and happiness, it's very, very different. And I think societally, I think there's conflict or discomfort in people even expressing that it's easy or it feels good. There was a very moralistic code in the 16th century when the Bible got rewritten. You got the King James Version, which doesn't bear too much resemblance to the original Bible if you go back to kind of the original versions in Greek or ancient Aramaic or the founding, or even like the Ethiopian kind of Bible. It got very much changed and created this society where we believe in punishment, where we believe in hardship, where we believe in pain. Once you can escape that construct and understand that it is about joy and pleasure and happiness and celebration, and it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be big. It's okay to do big things or dream big things, and that people aren't necessarily going to tear you down or attack you. I think that that's an incredibly liberating and freeing place to be accepting of yourself. And I think that's the ultimate journey, is to accept oneself, to understand oneself, to know who you are and what you are, and just the comfort that comes with that, the calm, the peace, allowing things to come to you instead of driving to chase them. And I think that's been the biggest difference. The biggest difference is I used to chase. I used to strive. I used to chase. And as you chase, you push things away. And as you move into true abundance, it just comes to you. You will it and it happens. You think about it and it happens. You want it and it happens. And it's very hard, I think, to describe to most people because it's such a foreign concept. It's so far outside of their realm of knowing. And that's why Upgrade has these steps, these stages, these stepping stones to move you through your personal evolution. Because I think if you've not done this work and you hear this conversation, it's just going to sound very foreign. It's not necessarily going to make any sense or resonate. But the people who've started down the journey and are working through the journey and are reaching these sort of higher levels of understanding and enlightenment and peace, I think it resonates. And I think the only thing I would caution is often we go through phases where we feel that and we're not actually there. We're actually a much lower value level. We're actually feeling something very, very different. And I think that can
much less evolved.
Yes.
You don't have to be as nice.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And that can be really confusing because they think they're there. And so there's a lot of movements and a lot of things that are kind of hedonistic and pleasure based that are artificial experiences at a much lower level that lack the true substance. And so I think that's been a very interesting to observe as well.
You know, speaking of that, I spent some time with one of I once have this wonderful student of ours that was a teacher of Kabbalah. And he was actually also a professor in such related matters, not to give away who he is. Expert in the Kabbalah. And I got to spend some time with him in his library one time. And then he explained to me how there's the oral law and the written law. And he explains that the oral law are the keys to the written law. And the reason we got there, it was because he found a lot of similarities from what we were teaching and what we were helping people install in terms of construct to what he knew that couldn't possibly be disclosed had I not been a part of his organization or organizations like his. So we were both curious of each other. And one thing he shared with me was very, very politically incorrect. That was profoundly, profoundly enlightening. He said suffering is not possible when you're willing to become close to oneness. And he says suffering is not possible. In fact, it would not be possible to not feel joy when you're close to oneness, when you're right there in the presence of divine. And I was like, wow, all the times I chose to suffer, I was far from the divine. And I'm not speaking religiously or not. This is just whatever divine means, right? And in this gentleman's mind, as he expressed it, he's like, people have been taught this lie that you have to suffer to become better, to earn, to evolve. But the suffering, it's not a have to. Suffering is the symptomology of being far away from oneness, being far away from this divine light. And so it sounds like you're there with this, because we've been talking recently, more and more and more increasingly, I've been hearing how much joy and peace and harmony you feel, and just being in a place of abundance. Even before some of the really magnificent events in the physical happened or started to happen, you were feeling this, right? And we talked about how reality will catch up. But for the people that are less certain, tell us how you handle that, if you don't mind.
I mean, I literally had a conversation about that yesterday. One of the people closest to me was like, I am so sorry I didn't trust. I'm so sorry I didn't believe. I knew that it was right. I knew that you had the answers, but all of my programming, all of my indoctrination of my life led me to believe that that had to be false, that couldn't be the case. It couldn't be easy. It couldn't be that way. And I think the most important point that I've learned, the most important value, is to show up for people in a healthy, positive, constructive way over and over and over again. And as you repeat your actions, as they see and witness it, it becomes impossible to refute. Your state change will often happen ahead of your reality change. And so there is a process of it catching up. And I think that is the place that is hard for people on the outside to witness and watch, because they have to trust and believe. And I think that's part of the process of the divine, of the oneness of life, is belief. So it's interesting watching people finding belief, and some people believe too hard. Again, they go to the extreme where they're so driven by their belief, the absolute rightness of their belief, the absolute certainty that nothing else can be possible. They actually are at the same end of the spectrum as the people who have no belief, can't see it, and don't believe. And again, it's about finding that moderation. It's coming back to the middle. It's finding centeredness, the return to center, the ability to dismiss thoughts so that thoughts come in and you let them go. Thoughts come in and you let them release. Acceptance within yourself of love, acceptance in yourself of abundance, acceptance in yourself of joy. There are mantras that I repeat to myself on a daily and constant basis that have built the psychological understanding or the underpinnings or the infrastructure that allows you to move to this place. So it's like, I feel joy, I feel abundance, I feel love, I receive joy, I receive love, I receive abundance, I feel joy, I feel love, I feel abundance. And if you repeat something to yourself often enough, it changes your state. It changes who you are. It changes that underlying programming. And I think the biggest mistake most people make is stopping too early, not pushing through, or believing that they've gotten there. And the thing is, as you move further along, you recognize that where you thought there was is not that place. It's not anywhere that you would ever expect it to be. It's actually in stillness. It's actually in nothingness, as much as anything else. Everyone else is chasing a goal and a destination, but it's realizing that it's a journey because you've given this self a journey. I think when you realize that everything in your entire life, your entire universe, your entire world is a choice that you made, when you realize that every single person that you surround yourself with is a mirror, when people behave badly, they're showing you something, they're teaching you something. When someone is complimentary or whatever, it's all a mirror. I think that allows you to view the world in such a different way and through such a different lens. One of your favorite things that you do, and knowing you as I do, when someone does something in your world, be it positive, distasteful, disconcerting, you immediately turn inside yourself and say, how is this a lesson for me? What can I learn from this? How can I improve? How can I do better? So you don't sit in a place of judgment. You're perceiving what other people are thinking. You're perceiving what they're doing. You're learning, you're questioning, you're understanding, and then you're internally reflecting on it. And I think that is such an important place to internally reflect on our own mental thoughts and our own journey and who we are, an understanding of who we are. So it's been beautiful to watch you evolving and growing on a continual basis, because you become more conscious. You challenge yourself continually on things that other people would let slide. There are things that other people will be like, he's an asshole. And you're like, okay, what is it in me that is causing that response or being that response? Or what is it that I need to learn? And it's very interesting to watch that process happen, because that's how you grow really fast. That's how you evolve really fast, is to recognize that it's the mirror. And so, yeah.
I once read this in relation to some of the topics we're talking about. And I think this warrants another conversation, by the way. If at some point, you're back in town, love to continue. One thing I read was the separation between humans. It's an illusion. And so if we take on this frame of everyone as a mirror, we're now able to see the differences, but also the similarities. But because of that frame, it causes us to let go of any unnecessary charge. Because what I read, it was related to the Kabbalah. It said the Creator created all of us to experience a self, really in different images, but the same image. So when do we find a different image? Sometimes just by looking in the mirror. But imagine someone who's never seen the mirror. They wouldn't know they're looking at themselves. And I think the quicker a human being is able to see that the mirror is everywhere, rapid evolution at a rate that I would say it's supernatural would happen, and it would become natural. And I think that's what I'm witnessing too. What I'm witnessing is not only are you doing that in your personal life as well, but you're doing that professionally, romantically, and something, and we don't need to share this here, but something magnificent has happened in all these areas, like a domino. I can't say how happy, how proud I am to be your friend and to witness all of this. And yet I sense this is just the beginning.
It's barely just begun.
Yeah, man. I look forward to seeing you again and celebrating